action! The Ace Attorney series is known for having its moments that just stick to you. Whether they be emotional, funny, dark, or just plain awesome. Whatever it may be, there's always a few good moments from each game. So the rules for this one are simple. Each game, at the very least, gets one moment, which includes Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright and Ace Attorney Investigations 2. But I'll give a spoiler warning when something from Investigations 2 shows up. But as far as the remaining 2 moments, either one game gets an additional 2 moments, or 2 games gets an additional moment each. So then, let's kick off Ace Attorney Month right about now. So in the 4th case of Trials and Tribulations, you play as Mia Fey, where you defend an escaped prison convict by the name of Terry Fawles, who was declared guilty for the murder of Dahlia Hawthorne 5 years ago, but is also on trial for the murder of her sister, Valerie. As you cross-examine others and pretty much prove that the real culprit was Dahlia Hawthorne, it's time to hear from Mr. Fawles himself. But then, this happens. The defendant just killed himself. He just fucking killed himself on the stand as others watched. You were so close to proving his innocence when the damn guy just goes and poisons himself. This was such a shock to Mia that she didn't even appear in a court of law for a year, where she finally got her revenge on that she-devil who fucking poisoned Diego Armando. And when she did, she felt as if she could successfully stand in a court of law finally. But seriously, not only was Terry Fawles killing himself such a huge blow to Mia, but also to Edgeworth because, well, no one won the case. Alright, looks like we won the case. I'm dead now. God damn it. Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. Quite the experience this was. A bunch of people thinking that witches actually exist? And what a bunch of nuts. Oh, wait, you mean to tell me that it's all just a government-run experiment? What?! So this whole time, I've been in a town full of memory-repressed people who think it's the 1500s and think that magic and witchcraft is actually real? Fucking hell, that's quite a shock! The storyteller revealing the truth behind Labyrinthia was a pretty holy shit moment. Knowing that no one really died, the magic wasn't real, and the stories that govern the town were all just that. Stories. It's all quite relieving. I mean, we kinda saw it earlier with Miss Kira, who was supposedly killed but is now roaming the streets unaware of who she really is. Also, there being no Great Witch Bezella and it was all just a made-up story was quite a shock as well. But that whole pure black thing was kinda seriously? Painted pure black? That's all it takes to make something invisible? Well then, I guess all criminals now know what to do when they don't want to get spotted. Oh, Investigations. What a game you are. Look, I don't hate this game, but seriously, people, how the hell is this the best game in the entire series? Sure, the music's good, and I like some of the characters, plus Edgeworth is better than ever, and Gumshoe is absolutely amazing, but there's nothing really much else I can say. The cases weren't spectacular, and the villains didn't impress me too much, and while the logic system is great, it's easily my least favorite game changer or gimmick or whatever the fuck you want to call it in the series. But that doesn't mean it isn't a good game. It has a couple of good moments, plus something that could possibly be interpreted as a masturbation joke. But the best moment from the game is who the real Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaoooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooo second Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa And then, as Turnabout reminiscence shows up, you find out more about this Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa Then they denounce that claim and say it was someone else. Then another person, Callisto U, kills them and claims to be the real Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa You disregard this because Kay says it's still her father, but then Detective Bad shows up and tells you that she was part of the Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa Also, it was made up of her, Burn Faraday, one of Faraday, one of Callisto's victims from Case 4, and Detective Bad himself. Because of their positions as defense, prosecution, and detective, they could expose the faults in the law, mainly evidence that was forged or illegal. After all this confusion on who really is the Yaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa Okay, I finally said something positive about investigations. Can this chain around my leg get cut off finally? And now we move on to Apollo Justice, a game where I disagree with all the hate it gets. I honestly prefer it over both the original game and Investigations. Seriously people, it wasn't that bad. The fourth case was pretty awesome, and hey, you actually get to play as Phoenix in that one. So at the beginning of Apollo Justice, you defend Phoenix Wright, who was framed for a murder, but then you later find out that Phoenix lost his attorney's badge 7 years ago. Blah blah blah, filler cases that aren't very good, and then Turnabout Succession comes around where it's a trial like normal. But then the defendant gets poisoned, and we travel back to the very trial where Phoenix lost his badge. I mean, Christ, the guy was given a piece of evidence by Christoph Gavin that Phoenix didn't even know was forged. When it appears that you've finally proven that Zach Grammari is innocent, Claver reports that the decisive evidence isn't legitimate. I mean, this comes as such an impact. Phoenix Wright, the hero of justice who got the correct verdict every single time, was found guilty of forging evidence? Christoph Gavin, you slimy bastard. I love you! But what makes this even worse is that Magnify, the victim in this case, wasn't murdered by anyone. He killed himself. So Zach was assumed to be the innocent man wrongfully put on trial, and Valent as the real murderer when nobody did the horrible deed. But Phoenix being able to take down Christoph not once, but twice without his badge feels oh so good. Thankfully he got it back in Dual Destinies, but losing your badge like that is just awful. All that hard work just taken away from you. And by someone who you had a lot of respect for also. Christoph Gavin, you glorious bastard. Okay, another moment from Layton versus Wright. What do we got now? Getting sent into a fucking medieval town? Nah. A boy is really a girl? No, that was done better in Dual Destinies. Putting the guilty party in a chamber and then lowering it into a fire pit? This could be interesting.
Please! Please, I beg you to reconsider! I'm not...
Witches are to be cast straight into the hellfire!
Holy fuck! They just burned that girl alive! They just lowered that girl, trapped in a chamber, into a fucking fire pit. Jesus, that's horrifying. I mean, the real witch trials were pretty scary on how they burned people alive at the stake or hung them when they were found guilty. Hell, they even did a test where you were tied to a chair and wanted to see if you would float or not. But seeing these people just get burnt like that, wow. I mean, even if they are the real witches, you feel bad for them. Unlike the real criminals in the other games where it feels pretty good to bring them down, with these people, it doesn't exactly feel right to do so. But it's all pretty relieving to know that no one actually died, as I previously said. But still, this shit is fucking scary! The rival prosecutor in Dual Destinies is Simon Blackwell, a convicted murderer. But the weird thing is that twice now we've had cases where the prosecutor is a murderer only having been found out by the defense. But when it's reversed, it can be pretty refreshing. What I mean by this is your prosecutor was already found guilty of murder, but it's up to the defense to prove that he didn't do it. The thing with Simon is that he insists he killed Athena's mother, and you're constantly believing this throughout the game. But then you go through the fifth case and suspect that he didn't really do it. This gets confirmed, and now all that's left is to prove that he didn't really kill her. And the battle against Simon as you try to prove his innocence is quite epic. Once you point out his final contradiction, Simon loses it, and the feeling is oh so good. And the absolute best part is that scene where Simon's shackles are finally released off his wrists. Knowing that you single-handedly proved his innocence of one who didn't commit murder feels just as satisfying as those chains being released. Then he's finally able to properly prosecute and bring down that phantom bastard. And speaking of proving an innocent man not guilty... Investigations 2. I'm probably one of the few Ace Attorney fans who's actually played it, but all I can say is that this is the amazingness that everyone seems to feel with the first Investigations. This is where the money's at. Too bad it never got released outside of Japan, because seriously, it's way better than the original. Hell, it's even got my favorite Pursuit theme. And as I said earlier about proving an innocent man not guilty, saving Jeff Masters is one of the greatest feelings in the entire series. So I'll fill you in on just who this guy is. He's the client for Gregory Edgeworth's last case. You know, the one where he proved Von Karma was doing some dirty tricks and resulted in a penalty, to which Von Karma then went on to kill Gregory? Yeah, that case. But what they didn't tell us is that Jeff was only found guilty of being an accomplice to murder, so he was sentenced to prison. And as for Jeff himself, he's a television dessert chef who was dubbed the greatest in the world in his category. Annually, he held a competition for chefs from around the world to see if he could be defeated, and thus someone would be crowned new greatest pastry chef in the world. But he's such a nice person that there's no way he could commit murder. Unfortunately, he was imprisoned for something that he didn't do. And the worst part is that the real killer, Dane Gustavia, killed Pierre Hoquet over 15 years ago and the statute of limitations ran out. But due to some rules such as traveling outside the country which delayed the statute, Dane could still be put on trial, and Jeff Masters could be saved. After 18 years of being in prison for something he didn't do, it's such an amazing feeling to let him know that he's been cleared of his crimes. And those tears of joy, pure beauty. What's for dessert today, you ask? Your freedom, Master Jeff. Your freedom. Farewell My Turnabout had one of the biggest plot twists in the entire Ace Attorney series. As per usual, you accept your client's case because you feel they've been wrongfully accused, and then you start tracking down the real murderer. But something doesn't exactly feel right. Sure, all the fingers point towards Adrian Andrews at first, but then as you begin to crack down on things, it turns out that nobody so far did the killing, but it was an assassin by the name of Shelley the Killer. Now what you need to find out is who hired him. But that's when it comes down to one conclusion. You don't want to believe it, you don't think it's real, but this happens anyways. Oh, you fucking dickweed! Engarde just betrayed you. He looked you in the face, flipped his hair back, magically pulled out a glass of something, and told you that he hired an assassin to kill Juan Corrida. You've always been led that your client is innocent, but when he's actually guilty, it's pretty damn thought-provoking because of the predicament you're in. Do you let a killer go free in order to save your friend, or do you get him a guilty verdict and sacrifice Maya? But in the end, not only do you manage to save Maya, but get Engarde declared guilty as well, which makes his defeat all the more satisfying. Those extra scars on his face represent what I imagine a lot of people wanted to do when this guy revealed what he did. That refreshing like a spring breeze persona you have? Well, looks like you're more disgusting than a fanfic about Taco Bell. Okay, maybe not that bad. While Engarde was satisfying to bring down, there's another villain who felt even more triumphant to defeat. The man who hid his murder for 15 long years. You all know who it is, Manfred von Karma. Oh, this guy. I used to hate him so much. And when you prove that he committed a murder 15 years ago, it feels so damn satisfying. The story goes that Edgeworth, his father, and a bailiff named Yanni Yogi were trapped in an elevator, and then Gregory and Yanni started arguing and then fighting. As Edgeworth watched, a gun came towards him and he threw it at hopes that it would stop the fighting. But just as he passed out, Edgeworth heard the gun fire and then a scream, thus resulting in him thinking that he killed his own father. And for 15 years, he thought he had done such a horrible act. But the scream that Edgeworth heard was Von Karma as he was shot in the shoulder from the gun that Edgeworth threw. So he entered the elevator and killed Gregory Edgeworth. Von Karma hid his crime from everyone else and almost got away with it. But he then wanted to get revenge on Edgeworth by pinning a crime on him. However, Von Karma knew that Phoenix would prove that to be a fluke. His main purpose was to get Edgeworth to confess to killing his father. Phoenix, of course, didn't believe that, and once you figure things out, it all points to one person, Von Karma, the man who constantly controlled the trial, manipulated his witnesses, and framed others. The relentless prosecutor who used any means necessary to get a guilty verdict for 40 long years. That moment when you accuse Von Karma and the cornered theme starts to play is so damn intense. When you finally manage to get his back to the wall and present that final piece of evidence, it feels so damn good to see Von Karma bash his head against the wall in defeat. Now, while this moment was extremely triumphant, there's only one more that can surpass it. You may know what it is already, so let's stop wasting time. If bringing down Manfred von Karma was satisfying, then proving this man's guilt was not only more so, but also one of the hardest things to do. And by that, I mean emotionally, because of how amazing of a character he is. You know he's the murderer, but you don't want to prove it. In the end, you bring his magnificent vengeance to fruition, just as he wants it. And then he spills everything. My favorite Ace Attorney moment of all time is Godot's confession. At this point, I'm counting the part where you accuse Godot, you pretty much prove that he did it, and he confesses his guilt. So, accusing him. You start to crack down on who really killed Misty Faye after Dahlia Hawthorne leaves Maya's body, and I didn't really want to believe it. I really didn't, but I knew in the back of my mind that he had done it. And the obviousness kept piling up, especially when the lights got turned off to show what Maya saw when she was getting attacked. And all you have to do is present his profile to prove that he could have hidden a dagger wound. As cornered from the original Phoenix Wright plays, it is so intense. Seriously, I was pretty hesitant on doing this that I must have just sat there for about 10 minutes on the same screen, until the point where I finally presented his profile, then it was all over, proving that he did it. The moment where Godot says that Phoenix won't be half the lawyer Mia was is his final attack, but then he sees her alongside Phoenix. Then, the epic moment where Phoenix and Mia together point in Godot's direction and say that the wound is under his mask. And then his face explodes. So freaking amazing! And finally, his confession. Godot sees the greatness in Phoenix and says that it was himself that he couldn't forgive. And then, my personal favorite quote in the entire series is said. The true beauty of this single scene. Godot releases his emotions because he knows that it's all over. He can be at rest knowing that what he's built up for his revenge has finally been concluded, and that everything is okay now. Then Godot and Phoenix share a final cup of coffee. Out of the massive amounts he's had over the years, this final one he's sharing with the man he used to call his enemy is the greatest he's ever had. And for the first time, he addresses Phoenix as Wright instead of Trite, showing his newly gained respect for him. And then, it's finally over, thus concluding my favorite Ace Attorney game of all time. Thank you guys very much for watching. I really appreciate it that you've been here for the very beginning of Ace Attorney Month. More videos will be coming out soon, so please like it if you did, dislike it if you did, and any sort of criticism is greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more Ace Attorney Month videos from me, you can always subscribe, have a grand day, and go yell objection at someone for the sole purpose of confusing them. It'll be funny.